Welcome, my dear friends. It's great to see you. In case we haven't been introduced before, I'm Stephen Clements, a writer, a gamer, and an enjoyer of big brain activities in general. On this channel, I perform dramatic story readings, I provide role-playing game and movie reviews, and I get to talk to interesting people, which we are doing again this episode because we're back for the second installment of Ernie Gygax Jr.'s Oral History. Now, if you've never heard of Ernie Gygax Jr., his full name is Ernest Gary Gygax Jr., son of Gary Gygax, creator of Dungeons & Dragons, one of the key figures that made the role-playing game industry a thing, and whose full name was Ernest Gary Gygax, and he'd be the senior. So our dear friend Ernie, part of a very important family that launched an industry that has changed the world, and he was there in the beginning, contributing to what we would come to know as Dungeons & Dragons. In this episode, we're going to get some deeper sketches of certain individuals, and timeline-wise, we're going back to the Brown House, which is the first house that Ernie remembers living in once he left Chicago for Lake Geneva. And without further ado, hope you enjoy the show.
Prologue to my being born is, of course, Dad getting to know my mother. I believe that I talked to you and said that they'd been little kids and played together.
Yeah.
My grandmother was called Murmur. Posey Burdick was her maiden name. So by the time Gary was around, this was her second husband. So she was Elmina Gygax. So Mom starts off with this. There's a whole lot that you don't know about how Gary and I got together. Murmur set us up the day after Christmas. Gary had gotten a new jazz album with Dakota Stanton, who was the singer. My Funny Valentine became our song. She suggested he play his new record on my record player, so they called me down for a phone call, and she gave me some candy and set us up. He asked me about this Italian guy that was 12 years older than I, and that was telling people that we were going out. Of course, he was married. I had no interest in him, but the people I lived with and roomed with and the lady working at the telephone company, they were all trying to set me up with this older Dago, or Italian. Unbeknownst to me, this gentleman drove us to a retirement party, and he wasn't even part of the telephone company, and he kept chasing me all around, trying to buy me drinks, and I kept ignoring him. Long story short, she says she's leaving out a whole bunch because it's probably not. My mom moves into a room that cousin Oravel had been renting upstairs at 925 Dodge Street, the Burdick house, where Dad spent most of his life when he wasn't in Chicago. So Mom's renting a room above downstairs where Dad is, which is quite convenient because there's an inside staircase with an outer door. So there's some amount of privacy. I lived there too for a while. It works. And the rent was $7 a month per room.
Oh,
and
man.
That happened to be the same room was Dad's old bedroom. When Gary found out what was going on and that there was a guy trying to drive around when I was going to work in his big Cadillac, and he was threatening that he'd kill me if Mom didn't marry him. So young Gary started walking me to work, carrying a gun, and he's walking me back and forth, and he even took the week off from his job in Chicago and stayed and walked me until that fellow took the hint and disappeared. The old idea of fair maiden needing assistance, making it easy because it's comfortable, because you get to go into your old room. He grew up. It's just upstairs, so you can have breakfast with Mom, whatever. She could probably be doing your laundry as you go up. I'm just Dad was just out of the Marine Corps at that time. And I already told you that he only did 3 months or so.
The pneumonia business.
So that's the Mary part. And that's really what I needed to say with that.
So your dad chased off a lech, basically.
Yeah,
that was harassing
Mom
him.
was gorgeous at that time.
A lot of people don't understand how we had hot chick technology in the past. Like, women in the past were beautiful, sometimes more beautiful than a lot of the beauty icons that are held up today that are mostly plastic and airbrushing. No. Like, real beauty, it's existed.
And the sad thing is that we all fade, and if we don't maintain, we drop. We lose.
That's true.
Because as soon as my mom broke her neck up north, falling down the stairs, and they took her to the hospital. And I know this is getting way out of areas, but all data is good data. She was living with her second husband, Don Walker, then. And they had a bedroom upstairs in this old house that they had up in Bruce, Wisconsin, way out in the sticks. It's an old dairy farm that she got for taxes.
Nice.
In beater condition, though. It's like $40,000 with lots of hundreds of acres. And it sold for probably $1,500 or $2,000 an acre at the end when she had to book out. So that's what she's been living on because her Social Security is minimal.
Yeah, not
Because
great.
she was mostly a housewife. And then she just found out that she was able to somehow get onto some of Dad's, even though, he has another wife because the system somehow works that way. It boosted
Whatever.
up, but it's still probably no more than 900 or something a month.
It's something, it's there for the taking, so you might as well. The people running the show, they're getting theirs. So we should legally get what's ours.
Yeah. Anyway, she fell down the stairs and she didn't have any insurance because she had said, oh, that's $100 a month. That could be feed for my horses. She had like 40 horses and a couple steers. So in a nutshell, she allowed herself to become basically stationary. And that went on for many years with Don just doing a ton of work. More and more. So she had her little slave. But at some point, a lady who used to throw hay and muck stalls and go hiking became sedentary. And that's the way things are now, where she has to have a walker. She's living in my cottage that I own. And she goes into the bedroom, into the kitchen, and into the bathroom. That's her. She doesn't go out on the back porch, which is a big deck or anything, because the cats will get out. She's a cat lady now. She went from a children lady, a mom, to some cats and dogs, then still some cats and dogs and a bunch of horses. And now she's still got some cats. I don't know what the total is, but it might be about 12.
Wow. She's a cat lady.
It doesn't do my home any good, but Mom's happy.
So last you left off.
We just leaving Chicago and coming to Lake Geneva. So at this point, they're already established visiting Dad and Mom at 925 Dodge Street. That's the beautiful home. And later on, even not only myself, but even Cindy's lived there for a little short period of time. Elisa owned it with her first husband. And now, sadly, it's out of the family and I think is being upgraded. It's an old place. So it was built by my great-grandfather on Dad's side, his mother's family, the Burdicks. The Burdicks were very important in Lake Geneva. My great-grandfather was a judge in Walworth County. And before that, I guess he was a lawyer. And then his son was a lawyer. So that'd be my grandmother's brother. He was Hugh Abram Burdick. So I grew up with lawyers. And they were also, for a while, my uncle, that's a great uncle, had been the city attorney. So there's some history here amongst all that sort of thing. So young Dad caddied at the Hillmore Golf Course. Why does that have anything of any value? Because I and Donna are working hard on trying to keep that as green space. But we're actually fighting having it returned to a golf course because it's been like 25 years fallow and it's filled with wildlife and everything. As far as I'm concerned, it's our central park, but I don't want it to be all just mowed down. And so anyway, I might be having to vote for a different mayor, which is sad because I'm friends with this one. But this looks like she's sold on the idea of having an exclusive thing where only people that have decent money will be paying, and maybe residents will get a discount. But they don't want to handle it themselves. They're going to get an outside firm, and all that creates, you can wish in one hand and poop in the other.
See which one fills up faster.
Yeah.
I know
it's pretty obvious what happens. But I'm looking at lots of pictures of young Dad holding myself with young Mom on like the porch.
There we go. Okay, we got a whole family wearing their little dresses, little kids.
Young Dad.
Oh.
young pudgy Dad. That's young Ernie. More young Ernie. Good and deal. I said the first girlfriend, Denise Ito, for me.
Oh, yeah.
And the television, Mom and Dad's wedding in the backyard at 925 Dodge Street.
It's an important house.
So not only was that the house that so much has happened in my family, but it also was the hookup spot for what created me.
That house is how the family perpetuated itself. Okay.
Yes. And this is Dad sitting with two other girls.
Oh, my.
That Mom said she disliked, even as a young gal. Mimi Potters and somebody else. So that was the competition.
That's funny.
Now here, and then again, this is a picture we've seen a lot. This is my dad with his name.
Those Gygax facial features, very distinct. They carry across through the generations, I can tell.
Well, I'm glad that they maintain the decorum to actually procreate with each other and not bounce around with the milkman and whatever. Or the Iceman in the old days it was. Iceman, make a backdoor delivery.
The human beings, man, we get up to all kinds of things. So you left Chicago.
We moved into a brown house on Center Street. It was exactly like 1 block away in Kitty Corner and then down across the street from 330 Center Street that everybody knows about. It was next to the railroad tracks, and that's where my earliest memories of Lake Geneva are. Dad would take the train to work, which was the Chicago Northwestern, and it was a commuter line. So he'd have to get on the train at like 6:15 in the morning, and it would take just a little over 2 hours. A little slower than driving to Chicago.
And you were about 8 or 10 at this point. Is that right?
Younger. This was 3, 4.
Oh, okay.
And then it went all the way up to 1969. So up to about 10. Dad would go down, and if he somehow missed one train, they had a second one a couple hours later, but that would be meaning that he was late. So that's a bad thing. He had to wear a suit and tie, crew cut kind of thing. That was for Fireman's Fund Insurance Company. As a little kid, I remember this little house. It had the heat registers were a metal grate on the floor close to the kitchen, and it would get really hot on cold days, and you could burn your feet on it. Our living room had a big gray radio with knobs, probably like 24 inches across, 2 feet, and maybe 14 inches high with a screen, but it almost like woven into a speaker. And that's, again, this is all young kid stuff. But I remember like Puff the Magic Dragon was a song I liked on there. And there was a few other things. So mom would be listening to the radio, trying to clean and do things. Other thoughts are this house was a lot of fun. As I said, it was built right next to the railroad tracks. So I loved that. Mom hated it because it was a hill up. So we could go up there. And she was always trying to keep us out. Plus, we had like 3 shrubs and a tree, and that was our woods. And one of my happiest memories while still in that house is each of us had a tricycle, and my tricycle was bigger than Elisa's. At some point, as Elisa's riding around and I'm riding around, I get off my tricycle and I start playing with a football. I've got some sort of cheapo, but still football. And at some point, I say, ha, ha, you can't get it. And then I kick it, and she runs off, go get the football. And I jump onto her tricycle. Then she comes back and drops the football and climbs on my tricycle, and her feet won't reach the pedals. As she's sitting on my bike, I'm doing circles around her. That kind of That's one of my happiest childhood memories.
Teasing your sister.
She's 23 months younger than I am. But I mean, it's fairly tight. But yeah, that was grand fun. Sometimes in that house, if there was a lot of rain, I think on 1 or 2 occasions, there was backup flooding. And the landlady, there was a rug down there, an old-fashioned tight rug, no frills or anything like this. And Mrs. Allen, rather than replace anything, took it across the street, dragged it across the street with her son. She was either a widow or a divorcee. And she put it up on a line with this big old wire brush thing and beat the crap out of it, left it in the sunshine, even though it had been, Mom was said, full of filth from the drain backing up. And then she got it back to us for her basement. So that was something that Mom wasn't real happy about. But the lady obviously wasn't into spending a great deal of money. She has the house, or had the house across the street, a bigger green and white house that I was part of the Geek Nation tour. That would have been 2019, I think, where we had 11 gamers that were staying in there, as well as we'd eat a meal in there, lunch and or dinner. I and Jeff Leeson, Tom Wam, and Jim Ward were all getting paid for whatever hours we were doing with these guys. And that's how I met Justin Lanassa. That's how I met a couple of Australian people, because Geek Nation Tours is extremely well known and is basically a specialist gaming and historical tour group. So if you want to go to a castle in England, you want to go to a castle in Japan, all those kinds of things, the Geek Nation Tours will set you up, but he does a good job. And he's a Canadian himself. So that's a sidetrack. But I mean, that house has gone on to have more meaning. The tracks are now torn out, and now it's just a bike path, walking path. They got rid of the hill where I was next to with it, because not totally by the houses, but with the road. And of all the things, Joe Orlowski once got hit by a train there. He was a TSR employee in that same area. It was only freight trains by then. I don't know how he got stuck there. I don't even think, good old
Did
Joe.
he live?
Yeah.
Okay.
He died later, sadly, heating gas. And he'd even gotten married. He was just such a dude that you'd have never thought. It was kind of like a baby Huey, if you remember those cartoons from.
I do.
And he was a great game player, but not very skilled. He would play to the bitter end. So you could get in that feeling of absolute aggression, superiority, and whatever. He'd have the last piece being killed in Russian campaign, whatever. So instead of just saying, it's over, he would give you that treat of having to finish him off to the last man. So that house has a few other nice things. It was only a block and a quarter away from Eastview School, which is where the first 3 children, I think, all went to Eastview to start with. So even up to Heidi, but then Heidi ended up, the family moved away. But this house was a good grounding. My cousin Hugh gave us a piano. So he cleared out the rat's nest that was in it, whatever, it was in storage. He had over 20 cars, and he repaired and tuned pianos, organs and things, and built organs for churches and things. That was his whole job. And he collected Ford Mercury cars and had them running. I don't know if that was a great idea, because when we got them later, a lot of them are fix or repair daily, as they say, the old Fords. But he liked it.
Did you go to that school as a young lad?
I went to Eastview School, and I went to kindergarten there. We were still there in that house until, like I said, probably by the time I was 9. So it went from about 4 to 9. It could be 3 to 9. I don't have a memory of my age. I just know it as a kid.
Sure.
The piano was fun to bang on. We probably had a black and white TV there, because we always had a TV, but I don't remember it in particular. In this house, though, Mom was, before I'd said that they were eating beans and a hot dog each in Chicago. Well, then Mom suddenly was splurging and doing things, making homemade Spanish rice for Dad often. And I hate green peppers. And she made it quite peppery. So my big thing was to sit at the table, even as a kid, and scoop it into a napkin. Then I'd take it and throw it underneath my bed. So that's one of the experiences that Mom got to have at that house, when she took the dust mop underneath the bed and pulled out a bunch of moldy Spanish rice.
Oh, that's gross.
Well, Dad would have made me eat it at the table. I wouldn't be able to get excused or anything, because he was one of those, eat everything you have on your table, and you'll get served the food later the next day if you don't eat it tonight. Dad was a very authoritarian. That's one of the things that carried on throughout. And it's not always good. It's got some positive energy, and it might be what helped drive him to do so much hard work. So Dad was that kind of authoritarian in this house. Elisa was always, even at like 3 years old, was always trying to somehow be my boss too. It's something that seems to have carried throughout the whole family. Throughout the whole era, we all are little despots. But I mean, we can get along well, but it's, if they would just understand that I'm right, that they're close. Each of them thinks the same thing back. So we all are correct, and the other ones are damn near as correct as we are. But I'm first, so I win. But
it's good for siblings to butt heads. It helps you learn how to compete and to stand up for yourself.
And you don't finish somebody off to the death if you're a sibling.
Yeah. Good point. Because you'll get in trouble.
So in that time period at this house, several things occurred. On one occasion, something to be fun to talk about is that I took a Raid can and gave my sister a Black Flag can, and we stepped off at 4 paces and then sprayed each other in the faces.
Oh my God.
So, we're dueling.
Oh my God.
So I think that was just before kindergarten. So Mom took us to the tub and filled the tub and was splashing our heads under the water and crying the whole time and giving us spankings and then putting our heads back in the water. So there was, that kind of thing. Our family did believe in corporal punishment, but they tried to keep it mostly to the posterior regions. That was one of Mom's most horrible times. And we had, like all other children, we had bath time. So Lisa and I would take baths together with different assorted plastic toys at the time. Probably even rubber toys, that era, 64, 65, 66. So anyway, a little Elisa, and we're in the tub one day, and then suddenly I go screaming to Mom, Mom! Elisa's pooping in the water. So there was a log floating around, and she had to scoop it out by hand, put it in the toilet, and then, somehow get fresh water and rinse us off. So, that's the kind of thing that I want my sisters to be able to read. And
so, Elisa, make sure, that you watch this episode so you know that Ernie told on you for shooting submarines in the tub.
Yeah. So that's the fun kind of things that brothers are good for.
Oh. So what's that
All right.
third?
And Donna's going off to visit my mom and help get her a shower and stuff right now. So that's
Okay.
just how tight. And she's, oh, I'm a better person, though nowhere near as good as her by living with her because some of it rubs off and I can't just be that greedy and whatever as I would otherwise be.
No, that's good. No, the people you have around you make a difference in who you become.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it continues.
So now I'm nervous about what this third story is going to be because we already have dueling raid cans,
Yep.
and now we got bath time submarines. And what's the third one?
The third one is that my mother took in troublesome and Down syndrome kids for babysitting.
Okay.
So one of them was about 5 years older than I was, and I don't remember his name. But what's famous for that is that while we were still living in that house, he talked about putting firecrackers in kitties' butts and that kind of thing. And he was not well. He was not mentally well. And by the time I was in fourth grade, which was still in this house, he at some point went to the Clark station, which is across from 723 William Street at the time. It doesn't exist anymore, and hung himself in the bathroom. So,
Wow.
and I drew a picture of that in school. Then they sent me to the principal's office in fourth grade because I was in art class. And they said, well, why are you, da da da. And I said, I knew him. And this is, so I had the letters Clark and a sign. I was not very good in artistic skills. I could get the impression across, just like my maps. They work,
yeah.
but they're not beautiful.
Telling a story and being technically proficient aren't often the same thing.
So that wasn't. So, and then there was another girl by the name of Shelby, and she suffered greatly from this. And she and this other guy, Craig, would play with my Jimmy Jet. Jimmy Jet was a Vietnam era thing where you'd have a little plastic plane with this rolling terrain. And when you'd hit a button, red flashes would happen. You were bombing. That was my favorite toy at that time. I got Shelby off of it, but at some other time, this kid, Craig West, who was still in kindergarten by the time I went to kindergarten, but he'd been there for like 4 years before they sent him off to Elkhorn, which is our special school. So yes, he broke my Jimmy Jet. I picked up a brick and threw it, hit him in the head, knocked him out. He was puking. And so we called the doctor. The doctor comes, resuscitates him, all this kind of stuff, cleans him up and says, well, it's lucky it was Craig. Because anybody else would have to be doing other things, but he's already deranged in the head. So, which is something you'd never hear anymore. But yeah, it just went over. My little 4-year-old or 5-year-old action was excused as like, well, those are those kids. And when you have a moron in the building, that's what you're going to get.
Wow. So this was a very combative time in your life, this specific address on Center Street that you were at. Jeez Louise.
Well, they were playing with my toys.
Well, he broke your toy, and that was the problem.
Oh, even playing with it was bad, but breaking is unforgivable. I never had a Jimmy Jet again. That was it. It was gone.
Done.
I got
Life ruined.
my pound of flesh.
Well, thank you, Ernie. I think we're about to time out, but okay, thank you for pulling that up onto a funny note at the end there. Yeah, that's it for today, and we'll follow up next week and do some more.
Okay, sounds good. We'll talk to you then. All right, bye now.
Now that was interesting, wasn't it? Ernie continues to surprise because, one, I didn't even know what a Jimmy Jet was, let alone that it was worth committing violence over. And I thought it was fun that we got to take a look at so many old family photos to really get a sense of the place and the people that we're talking about. And believe me, Ernie has an incredible collection. They were taking selfies before selfies were a thing. Like, I remember growing up and having some pictures taken of me and the family, but these folks, they love their cameras. And now it gets added to the historical record. Well, my dear friends, I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any thoughts or recollections that Ernie pinged off of, please drop those in the comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Ernie would like to hear what you have to say too, so find him on Facebook. We'll post a link in the description below. And maybe you want to play Dungeons & Dragons with him. Well, he'd like to play Dungeons & Dragons with you too. So send him a message. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future installations of Ernie's oral history. And my dear friends, while we part for now, I wish you nothing but the best.